The Oracle Network. The Oracle Network. Look deeper.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot.
16910 means we got shots fired. 4:15 a.m. Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter, active shooter.
Active shooter mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Hour and a half. That is how long officials say this incident lasted. An hour and a half that felt like a single second and a lifetime all at once. Friday afternoon.
It's a large industrial business park.
The first call came in at 1:24.
The shooter's inside. We don't know where he's at still.
4 minutes later, police were on the scene. 8 SWAT teams hunting for one man with a gun.
Oh my God.
A man who had brought his gun to work that day.
He had a .40 caliber firearm
and would get fired during a meeting.
He opened fire right after the termination.
The workplace can often be fraught with stress and anxiety for some, and like a second home for others. No matter which end of the spectrum, or even somewhere in between you fall, the general feeling is that most workplaces are relatively safe, with some apparent exceptions that are inherently dangerous, such as with firefighters or police officers. While most warehouse jobs have their fair share of safety risks, it is generally the type of job that one can do each day without fear of not returning home each evening. The last thing an employee would ever expect to happen during the course of their workday is for a coworker to randomly open fire on their colleagues and engage in an hour-and-a-half standoff with police. All because the highly disturbed employee was facing employment termination that day, and he wasn't going down without a fight. It was a fight in which no victim stood a chance of winning, because today's shooter brought his firearm into work, knowing he was about to be fired, and planned to do as much damage as possible on his way out. What started out as a typical Friday at the Pratt Company in Aurora, Illinois, ended in a bloodbath that extinguished the lives. What started out as a typical Friday at the Pratt Company in Aurora, Illinois, ended in a bloodbath that extinguished the lives of 5 innocent people and injured another 6. Hundreds, if not more, other lives were forever changed due to one man's wrath that caused him to lose all control and murder people he had worked with for years. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the no notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as Paul. Aurora, Illinois, is typically very cold and overcast during the winter. February 15th, 2019 was on trend for the most part, although the day was bright and sunny. Appearances can be deceiving, however. Though, from the inside looking out, it appeared to be a lovely day. On the outside, it was bitterly cold, and things were only looking to get worse as the day progressed, and this was particularly true for the employees at the Henry Pratt Company at 641 Archer Avenue. The company is located in Kane County, just outside of the Chicago suburbs and directly to the west. Paul began his day at 6:45 a.m., which is when he arrived at work. Today was a little different for Paul, though. Today wasn't looking to be a good day. No, Paul could see the writing on the wall, and he knew he would be fired, so he intended to be fully prepared for the meeting. Before walking into work for the day, Paul checked his things, ensuring that his .40 caliber Smith & Wesson semi-automatic pistol, with its green laser sight, was locked and loaded, ready to wreak havoc on anyone that crossed him. After settling into work for the day, Paul mentioned to several coworkers that he was concerned about getting fired. He even told one employee that if he got fired, he would shoot everyone in the building and blow up the police. Now, to most people, this would seem to be an alarming statement, enough for one to take pause and consider reporting it. Yet, this employee didn't report the threat because, as he later told police, Paul was always saying, quote, off-the-wall stuff, and they didn't pay it any mind. This is an instance where the see something, say something mantra comes into play. There is absolutely no blame being placed. This is not uncommon to so many active shooter stories we have covered. Sometimes, though, just reporting what seems like an innocent enough statement could possibly prevent a horrible tragedy. At least one employee knew that Paul kept a gun in the car, yet never saw Paul with the weapon on him at work and reported that they had no idea Paul brought it with him that day. It is believed that Paul brought the gun in with him when the day started, as video surveillance never shows him going out to his car during the day leading up to the shooting. Around 1 p.m. that afternoon, the company human resources manager, Clayton Parks, text messaged the union steward, Tim Williams, about a meeting Clayton was going to have with Paul. You see, Paul was about to be written up and terminated for a slew of violations, one of which was not wearing his safety glasses. There were 6 men present in this meeting. Including Paul, HR manager Clayton, union steward Tim, and the plant manager Josh Pinkard, hold operator Russell Byer, and an HR intern Trevor Weiner. Trevor was actually a student at Northern Illinois University, but had just begun his first day of internship that very morning. After Paul was requested to come into the meeting room, he was observed walking over to his workstation, retrieved something from his belongings, put on a hooded sweatshirt, and went into the bathroom. Paul was in the bathroom for a few minutes before entering the meeting. Nearly the moment formalities were exchanged, Paul was informed that he was being written up for the safety glasses violation. As a result of the variety of other violations, he would be terminated, and that process would begin immediately. Immediately, as in right then and there.
We can confirm that the individual was being terminated on Friday for a culmination of various workplace rules violations in accordance with our agreement.
Paul instantly became enraged, yelling and swearing at the men in the room. Plant manager Josh Pinkard wasn't one to put up with insubordination and stood to end the meeting, asking Paul to leave the room. Paul replied, quote, "Yeah, it's over," and pulled out his gun. Without hesitation, Paul opened fire, shooting and killing 4 of the 5 men. Clayton, Josh, Russell, and Trevor hardly stood a chance, as they were almost trapped in a room with a madman that had a gun. Tim Williams was near the door and had been shot in the wrist, yet he had the presence of mind and absolute bravery to get up. As he ran from the room, he called out, trying to warn as many others as possible there was an active shooter. This action most certainly spared many lives more significant physical pain or loss. Paul chased Tim from the room and shot him twice in the back. Miraculously, Tim survived the attack, but he continues to live with bullets lodged in his back.
It was like a big machine gun or something. Something like a pop, 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 pop.
After shooting Tim, Paul went to the loading dock where he shot and killed Vicente Juarez. Later, witnesses would report that Paul specifically targeted Vicente, although the reason why doesn't seem apparent. Right afterward, Paul knew he needed to act because he was sure police were already on the way. He wasn't wrong. Several 911 calls were placed to report an active shooter situation. Positioning himself by a doorway, while still armed with a gun, Paul laid in wait, planning to ambush any police that arrived for help. The first 911 call came in about 1:24 p.m., and chillingly, gunshots can be heard in the background of one of the calls.
Aurora 911, where's your emergency?
I'm in Pratt, 641 Archer. You got a gunman.
The first responders arrived within 4 minutes. At 1:28 p.m., many agencies responded to the scene, including the FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals Service, local police, and 8 different SWAT teams. As they cautiously approached the building, Paul started shooting, and at 1:30 p.m., dispatch received the first report of an officer being shot. A minute later, dispatch again received word that 4 victims were in the meeting room on one floor, and a 5th victim was discovered on a separate floor. Armored cars arrived on the scene simultaneously, allowing police to get close to the area where Paul was shooting. Also, at 1:31 p.m., the Aurora SWAT team entered the building from a different entry point. At 1:32 p.m., another report came through. This time, it was that a second officer was shot inside the building. By 1:34 p.m., the 4th officer was reported being shot inside the building. It is unknown when the 3rd officer was reportedly shot.
He was going up the first stairs, so I turned and yelled at him, my gun pointed towards him, Aurora police. And before I could say the word Aurora, he started firing at us, and the first shot hit me in the knee.
Between 1:35 and 1:52 p.m., the injured officers were extracted from the building and taken for emergency services. Simultaneously, a separate operation was ongoing, wherein employees were being evacuated from the building.
There's something about saying, "Hey, I'm gonna see them one more time." You know, you make peace with the man upstairs, and you said, "If you're gonna take me, take me." But I'm gonna fight until I get to see my family one more time.
Around 2:15 p.m., an armored police car crashed through the entrance, sending shards of glass spewing everywhere in the small entryway, where Paul was seen earlier, firing at police. The building was instantly swarming with police, searching for Paul inside of the building.
Just ran. I figured I couldn't sit there, I couldn't drop, so whether it was the adrenaline or whatever, you just kept going. And I headed towards the dock area, and tell everybody I did my best impression of Javi Baez, did a nice slide.
No contact was made for nearly an hour until officers and Paul finally happened upon each other, and gunfire was exchanged. At 2:58 p.m., dispatch was notified that Paul had been located inside the machine shop towards the building's rear. A minute later, it was reported that the suspect was shot and killed in an exchange of gunfire.
Suspect appears to be down. Suspect appears to be down.
As soon as we heard the first gunshots in there were probably another 10 seconds of gunshot.
Surveillance footage that was later pooled showed Paul pacing in the vestibule area, walking up and down the stairs in the building's rear corner. The video footage lasted 8 long minutes, depicting Paul hiding out, ready to shoot at the first police officers he saw, as he waited. Between shooting fellow employees and his subsequent shootout with police, at least 64 shots were fired from Paul's weapon.
We went on lockdown ourselves. I told my nephew to lock all the doors.
When they finally located his hiding spot and approached the building, Paul started shooting at the police, and they returned fire. Paul ultimately was hit and killed, sustaining at least 6 shots, one of which was a probable self-inflicted.